So I'm back with another market update, and Bitcoin is consolidating stubbornly above 90K. And when price refuses to break down, it usually means an explosive move is coming. With some news starting to flip more bullish, it looks like this move might be coming soon. Let's jump in and take a closer look. So first up, we're just going to look at some of the news. We've got So first up, we're just going to take a look at some of the news that's just come out today. We had the Bank of Japan announce that they're going to hold their rates this month. We mentioned in the last video that that was something to watch out for. We've got the FOMC, Bank of Japan rates decision coming out early next month. Today, we did just get that news that it's looking like they're going to hold off on Q2 hikes and push that out into Q3 due to the uncertainty from tariffs. So that is good news. I can definitely see markets continuing to rally higher off the back of that. Another great thing to see is you've got another basically micro strategy coming into the game. They're going to be called 21, and it's basically the founder of Tether, SoftBank Group, and Jack Mallers, all working together to launch this basically new Bitcoin native company. And they're going to start the company with 42,000 Bitcoin. And I bet that they are going to come hard for MicroStrategy. There's a lot of money behind these guys. So I think you're going to see, steady inflows into their reserve. And this is just supporting the idea of more and more companies getting involved in Bitcoin. And I think the big catalyst that we could see in the next year is going to be banks. We're already getting word of banks, being interested in getting in on Bitcoin. So I think that that's the catalyst that sends us much, much higher. Looking at some of the data that we've been, watching for the last couple of weeks, we've got our exchange volume here starting to tick up. Which is a good sign. We do, like I said, we do want to see this high get taken out. And that's going to suggest, some more momentum and signs of a, sustained rally. But it does look, back in off August low, Bitcoin's price action was kind of slow and kind of grinded up for a long time. And the exchange volume kind of shows you that it was kind of consolidating in a bit of accumulation until Trump got in and then it really took off. So this is quite an aggressive move. And it's worth pointing out, this is, if it's the low, it is a higher low. The low previous was 28 billion. Now this current low was down at 30. And one thing I would like to see on a higher time frame, this is looking at all the data basically, is this spike here, this all-time high in exchange volume is off last cycle. So, it would be great to see that taken out. And I think if you did get that exchange volume up to these levels again, which are, 165 billion on the daily, you would see alts, Bitcoin, everything rally much, much higher. But it is worth, pointing out that this data now is slightly skewed just because of the ETF inflows. So, basically last cycle was fully fueled by retail, and now retail are not necessarily buying purely Bitcoin, but they're also buying the ETFs. They're buying things like MicroStrategy, which are investments in Bitcoin, but they're not going to be showing up on this exchange volume. So maybe we don't, manage to take out those highs, but I think if we do, it's going to suggest much higher prices across the board. Last thing we're going to take a look at here before we jump into the charts is the ETF inflow. Looking at the weekly chart here. So this is basically all the data since the start of the ETF. And we talked about this last video about how, be careful when you see these massive inflow days because they've often marked a top in the Bitcoin price or at least a period of, cooling off. So One thing looking at the weekly that's slightly different that we've never actually seen before is, you know, the inflows into the ETFs tend to, be pretty steady, slowly ramping up into the high. And then you get that high. And with that slow ramp up, you get this steady, climb in the Bitcoin price here. You've seen it here. This orange line here is the Bitcoin price. You can see we got this, down week. Bitcoin price stalled, then took off again as you got 3 straight weeks of inflows. And that last all-time high marked the top. And that was basically, it then for Bitcoin for 6 months. And then the ETF inflows started picking up again when, Trump was getting in. And the actual inauguration, you can see in the lead up, it was steady climb. And then the week of after the inauguration, it put in a new all-time high. And the only difference being here that I'm looking at is the fact that we've had this huge spike in volume that's almost as high as it was on the Trump inauguration. But in the weeks leading up to this, you had very little to no volume. So this is all obviously due to the uncertainty behind the tariffs. And if this move was to sustain itself for multiple weeks, or maybe you get, a week where you get inflows but not a ton, it would be a sign that it's just accumulation and that you might, get multiple more weeks to even a month of straight inflows. So that's something I'm keeping an eye on when it comes to the ETF. We're going to take a look at the Bitcoin chart now. So looking at Bitcoin here, just on the, on the daily, we've looked at this in other videos, but you've got this 50% level that I talked about in the last video about, if we can get consecutive daily closes and a weekly close above this 50%, it's probably a sign that we are going to go higher. And we have now had that weekly close above the 50%. We've actually been trading above it now for 7 days. The fact that we're consolidating like this after 7 days at these highs suggests to me that, we're preparing for the next move up. Looks very similar to what we've seen, out of the low, that first drive up, we got up to these highs around the 85K mark, and then we just consolidated under the resistance at 85K for again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 days. And then on the 9th day, we broke, followed through with momentum, 2 very strong days. And, it's held up very well above this 50%. You can see the other red line on my chart, basically off last cycle's highs. That's the resistance that we're consolidating under. And I do believe, I've said this in my last video, I think if we get a push above this with momentum, clean back test of it, I don't think you see Bitcoin below that line again this cycle. I think we're looking at much, much higher prices in the near future. So, but until we are above that line, we do have to consider the downside. And what I'm looking at is that 50% level. So that previous resistance should now be very strong support if we were to get a back test of it. So we got demand here, 50% level, previous resistance, all in this area. So that's sitting bang on 85K. I think if we get that low, it's a really good buying opportunity. I'm not sure that Bitcoin price will get down that low. We do have a fair value gap here on the 4R that needs filled. So that would be kind of the first area I'm looking at, and that starts at 90,500 and goes down as low as 88.7. So first area of interest is this 90 to 88K mark, and then below that we're going to should have strong support at the 85K level, and you've got a fair value gap here, just above 85, 85 to 86. So a couple of levels I'm looking at there. You know, fear and greed did climb up, but it's cooling off a little bit now. You know, we're back down into that mid range, 50, 54 reading. And looking at the dollar, this is the Dixie. So looking at this on the weekly, it is breaking down. It looks like, you know, I've covered this before, but we've been in a macro bull run here since 2008. So basically the financial crisis. It's been up only, and this looks like the first macro lower high. So this could send the dollar down for, you know, multiple years, 3-4 years. It could be in recovery. And now, you know, first indicator of that has kind of been this break of, you know, this previous resistance. You can see here after the high was put in back in 2022, we tested this level in 2023 and got a strong bounce. You can see we're putting in lower highs, another lower high, lower low, and then we took this out. So this provided a very strong bounce, bit of a fake out move, and now we've actually, for the first time in 1,120 days, so 3 years, it's been since we were at these levels on the dollar. When we did break that support, turned it into resistance, we did get the back test on the daily. You can see broke below, consolidated, broke below, and then quickly came back up and tested it now as resistance. So very clear resistance now. To the downside, you know, it was a huge bull run for the dollar. So taking off the low to the high, the next major support level is around that 93 level. And that's that 50% level we've talked about numerous times on Bitcoin, where, you know, you're probably going to see first reaction, quite a strong bounce, could last, you know, multiple months up, but I think it ends up resulting in a lower high again. And basically once this breaks below the 50% level, that's when, you know, things look weak and you could start losing confidence in these things. So that's something I'm watching for on the dollar chart. And the last thing I'm going to cover today is the others chart. So, you know, looking at the others chart here, this is last cycle. We failed to take out the high on that last run up. So still area of interest, looking to take that high. Although this, you know, was a very painful time for anybody holding alts, it was actually higher low. Although your alts are probably down a lot more than they were back here. This is back in August. A lot of alts put in new lows. The reason for this is obviously there's a lot more actual altcoins in circulation at the minute. So although we didn't actually get a lower low, most of your alts are probably putting in lower lows. So look for the ones that have managed to hold their structure. That's a sign of strength. But yeah, every chance now, because this is a higher low, that, you know, we can push up, put in a higher high, take out this high. At least that's what I'm looking for. Hopefully, you know, we've got a very clean Elliott wave here. So it did complete. I think the best case scenario for your alt is basically if we completed a full ABC, move down for a full basic reset. And this did feel like a full-blown bear market for the altcoins. There's a good chance, you know, we start a brand new macro Elliott wave here that could take us much higher in the future. So something like that, maybe a back test, that support, depending on when we break that. But, you know, there's a scenario where I see, you know, altcoins, the crypto basically market cap excluding Bitcoin get close to the $1 trillion. You know, Bitcoin could go much, much higher this cycle. So some things I'm keeping an eye out for. That's it for today. If you did like, subscribe, and really helps the channel out. And thank you. And I'll see you in the next market update.